In a time of spiritual ruin, when God's people had turned away from him, a young king rose from the ashes of idolatry to restore worship and faith in Judah. His name was Hezekiah, and though only 25 years old when he began his reign, he was destined to change the course of history for Israel. Hezekiah's story is not one of restoration, prayer, and miracles, a testament to the power of faith and God's intervention in the lives of his people. Upon ascending the throne, Hezekiah knew his first and most pressing task, the purification of the temple. His father, Ahaz, had sealed the temple doors and filled the sanctuary with idols, abandoning the worship of the true God. Hezekiah, in contrast, was committed to restoring the temple as the central place of worship. With a heavy heart, Hezekiah commanded the Levites to gather and purify the temple. He addressed them directly. "Our fathers forsook God and turned their faces away from his dwelling place. Now it is time for us to turn back to the Lord." His decree was clear: remove all defilement from the temple and consecrate it once more. The Levites worked tirelessly, purging the temple of the defiled idols. The sacred lamps were rekindled, the incense burned again, and the altar was prepared for sacrifice. After 8 days of cleansing, the temple was restored. The nation was about to experience a spiritual revival, led by a king who dared to believe that God could heal and restore. Hezekiah understood that true revival required more than just restoring the temple. It required unity. So he made a bold decision to bring the people of Israel and Judah together to celebrate the Passover. It had been generations since the Passover had been celebrated in its fullness, and the people were scattered across the land, with many lost to idolatry. Yet Hezekiah sent out a proclamation, calling all people from Beersheba to Dan to return to Jerusalem. The response was mixed. Many ridiculed the messengers, but some from the tribes of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to worship. The Passover feast began, and for the first time in years the people of God rejoiced together, offering sacrifices and praising the Lord. The celebration was so great that Hezekiah even extended it for an additional 7 days. This was unprecedented, a moment of national revival and a foreshadowing of what could happen when the people turned their hearts fully back to God. Just as the people of Judah began to find their way back to God, disaster struck. The Assyrian Empire, under the ruthless leadership of King Sennacherib, set its sights on Judah. The mighty army had already decimated city after city, and now it was Jerusalem's turn. Sennacherib sent a message of defiance, mocking Hezekiah and his God. The letter was clear: "Your God cannot save you. Surrender now, or face annihilation." Fear swept through the city. The walls were weak, the army was small, and the situation seemed hopeless. But Hezekiah did not panic. Instead, he took the letter and laid it before God in the temple, praying fervently, "Lord, you alone are God. Save us. Let all the kingdoms know that you are God." God heard Hezekiah's prayer and responded with a miracle. That night an angel of the Lord swept through the Assyrian camp, striking down 185,000 soldiers. By dawn, Sennacherib's forces were utterly destroyed, without a single sword being lifted by the people of Judah. Sennacherib was forced to retreat in disgrace, and Jerusalem was saved, not through human effort, but by the hand of God. Hezekiah's faith had been rewarded, and God's power had proven to be greater than any earthly empire. But Hezekiah's trials were far from over. One day the prophet Isaiah came to him with a devastating message. "Set your house in order, for you will die." Hezekiah, the king who had seen God deliver his nation, now faced the ultimate test, his own death. But instead of succumbing to despair, Hezekiah turned to God once again, weeping and praying for mercy. In his desperate plea, Hezekiah asked God to remember his faithfulness. God heard him, and within moments Isaiah returned with a new word. "The Lord has heard your prayer. 15 more years of life will be granted to you." Despite his incredible faith and the miracles God performed, Hezekiah's life was not without its flaws. In his final years, pride crept in. When envoys from Babylon came to inquire about his miraculous healing, Hezekiah, perhaps too proud of his kingdom's glory, showed them his treasures, his wealth, his accomplishments, and his power. But God left him to test his heart, and soon after, Isaiah came with a sobering prophecy. The treasures of Judah would one day be carried off to Babylon. Pride led to a moment of judgment, but Hezekiah repented. The kingdom would be spared from judgment in his lifetime, but the seeds of future captivity were sown. Hezekiah's reign teaches us these vital lessons. God honors those who restore his worship. Faith in God overcomes fear. In the face of mighty empires and insurmountable odds, God is our refuge and strength. Humility keeps us grounded. Even in moments of great success, we must remain humble and dependent on God. Hezekiah's story challenges us today. When we face our own battles, be they spiritual, emotional, or physical, will we turn to God with the same faith? Will we, like Hezekiah, seek God's will above all else? Even in hopeless situations, will you turn to the Lord, not relying on your human strength, alliances, or fear, but trusting in God's power and his proven ability to never fail? Today, regardless of our own battles, struggles that seem overwhelming, what do we do? Do we surrender to doubt, or do we, like Hezekiah, lay it all before the Lord? Let Hezekiah's story remind you, God is still faithful. He still answers prayer. He still fights for those who trust in him. He is too faithful to fail you.